I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey lurkers, welcome to this week's episode. This week we're heading to the wild and wonderful, or wild and weird, West by God, Virginia. That's West Virginia, just to clarify. This topic was a suggestion by Kelly, who I have mentioned many times. And the topic is the Flatwoods Monster. It's also called the Braxton County Monster, Braxy, and the Frametown Monster. And if you're me, you call it the Braxton Hicks Monster because you've had kids and know what Braxton Hicks contractions are and can't seem to separate the two in your head. So Braxton Hicks contractions are practice contractions pregnant women have that help get the body ready for the real thing. And now it's forever meshed with the Flatwoods Monster. Let's get back on track. The setting for this tale is a small town called Flatwoods in Braxton County in West Virginia. It's basically located in the center of the state. This rural community was incorporated in 1902 and named for the level uplands of Granny Creek, Salt Lick Creek, and Flatwoods Run. The areas around Flatwoods were most likely the site of Native American villages many years before European settlers came to the area in the 1700s. The town first appears on a map in 1873 and was an important stop on the railroad line. On September 12, 1952, in the evening just before it was fully dark, Edison May 13, Freddie May 11, Teddy Neal 13, Neil Nunley 14, Olin Shaver 14, Ronald Jordan 14, and Ronald Shaver 10 were playing football on the lawn of the Flatwoods Elementary School with Don Eubank, John David Jordan, and Lawrence Squires. While they were playing, they suddenly saw a bright light streak across the sky, and it appeared to crash into the hillside on a farm owned by G. Bailey Fisher. The area where the thing landed was a wide open field that was nearly level and covered in grass, surrounded by trees, right on top of the mountain. The object came in fast, then slowed, and was able to do a soft landing and sank down slowly. The kids thought it was a meteorite, and their teacher told them fragments should be collected for the West Virginia State Geological Department if they ever came across one. They decided to check out what they had seen and took off for the Fisher farm. The May home was on the way, and the boys stopped to tell their mother, Kathleen May, what they had seen. Kathleen had just gotten home from work. She was home only about 10 minutes when the boys came running in, telling her what they had seen and where they were going. Kathleen wouldn't let the boys go alone, so she grabbed a flashlight and called on Gene Lemon, a National Guardsman, aged 18, to join them. Kathleen and Gene both had flashlights, and they, the boys, and Richie, the family dog, went in search of what they had seen. There was a metallic smell in the air that irritated their throats and made their chests feel heavy, and there was a whining noise. The odor of sulfur was detected and grew stronger as misty fog engulfed the area ahead of them. When they reached the crash site, the group saw a pulsing red light. Mrs. May heard a strange hissing noise like frying bacon, and a violent thumping began on the inside, while a dense cloud of mist escaped the object with a loud hiss. They saw a pair of eyes high in a tree, and thought it was perhaps an animal. The eyes glowed through the fog. Eugene Lemon shined his flashlight into the tree, and the group saw a terrifying sight. They screamed as the flashlight illuminated a tremendous towering figure lit up from the inside like a Christmas tree. It was a 10-foot tall creature with a bright red head shaped like a spade and what appeared to be a dark green metal dress. A spade, in case you aren't sure, is the shape in a deck of cards that looks like a leaf, sort of. The eyes lit up brightly, and the light that was projected from the eyes beamed outward, cutting through the fog and illuminating the area. They watched as light beams shot forward and shone over their heads. The entire area glowed from the monster. Light came out of what appeared to be glass on the front of the head of the creature. It turned slowly around, wavering from left to right as if searching the horizon with its eye beams. The creature's hands were twisted and clawed. The thing appeared to levitate off the ground and propelled itself down the path. A strange, sickening mist hung in the air while the creature hissed and glided quickly towards the witnesses. It was hissing and making frying noises and spit an oily substance all over Mrs. May's dress. It didn't burn, and she didn't even notice it until after she was home. Mrs. May said it was a fire-breathing monster 10 feet tall, with a bright green body and a blood-red face. It bounced and floated towards the group. She said, "It looked like Frankenstein. It couldn't have been human." Eugene Lemon, the National Guardsman, said he thought he saw a person or raccoon until he put his flashlight on the thing. Then he saw the monster with the blushing face and green body that he said seemed to glow. Lemon stared and then screamed as the creature duck-walked toward them. They were all in a dream-like state, most likely in shock, before finally coming to their senses. They all fled, looking over their shoulders as they ran. There was an overpowering metallic odor that nauseated them. They all had difficulty breathing. Some were bruised and bleeding, coughing and gagging, and had inflamed noses and throats. Mrs. May said they vomited for several hours. Some of the members of the group suffered from throat irritation, vomiting, and nausea that persisted for days. These symptoms were passed off as side effects of hysteria, but it's worth mentioning that these are also telltale signs of exposure to mustard gas. Mrs. May and Eugene Lemon reported the incident to the local authorities. An armed posse went to the scene, led by A. Lee Stewart, the co-publisher of the Braxton County Democrat newspaper. Stewart said the odor was still there, and it was kind of warm and sickening. There were 2 places, about 6 to 8 feet in diameter, where the brush was trampled down. Stewart said, "I hate to say I believed it, but I hate to say I don't believe it. Those people were scared, badly scared, and I sure smelled something." One news publisher said that what they saw was vapor left by a meteorite that reportedly passed over the area. Mrs. Earl Hutchinson of Skelton saw something shiny hovering in the sky some distance from her home. Her first thought was that it was a man in a parachute, but it kept swinging back and forth and up and down, and she figured it was the Flatwoods Monster. Not long before the sighting at Fisher's Farm, a woman by the name of Audra Harper saw something similar to the one seen in Flatwood. Ms. Harper was walking through the woods near her home, near the town of Heaters. Heaters is about 5 miles north of Flatwoods. Audra Harper and her friend were walking to a nearby store. The road leading out of their property was badly rutted, so they were taking a shortcut through the forest, instead of walking the road, which would have increased their trip significantly. About a half-mile into their trip, they noticed a ball of fire on one of the hills they were passing. Audra Harper dismissed it, assuming that one of her neighbors were fox chasing, which is basically fox hunting. When Audra glanced back, she saw something unbelievable. The fire had vanished, and in its place stood the tall, dark silhouette of a man-shaped figure. Terrified, Audra Harper and her friend ran, escaping amongst the rocks and boulders on the hillside. The day after the September 12th incident in Flatwoods, so December 13th, there was another strange sighting that happened near Strange Creek, which is about 20 miles south of Flatwoods. George and Edith Snatowski and their 18-month-old son were driving through the area between Clay and Braxton County on Route 4. The area there was pretty rural. While they were driving, their car died suddenly. Mr. Snatowski attempted to restart the car, but couldn't get it to start. It was at night and the road was deserted. The Snatowskis were trying to figure out what they should do when they began to smell a strong sulfurous smell. The scent filled the air and the baby began to cry. A strange bright light appeared in the darkness, and the couple saw a 10-foot-tall creature hovering in front of their car. The description was similar to the other sightings, except this time the creature was not wearing what is presumed to be its spade-shaped hood. Instead, its head was reportedly reptilian and bony. I'm going to date myself here. Does anyone listening remember watching a miniseries a long time ago, like in the 80s, called V? It featured reptilian aliens. Good miniseries if you can find it. Anyway, so this time the creature has a reptilian bony head. The creature dragged its lizard-like hands across the hood of the car before drifting away into the woods. As soon as the monster was out of sight, the car restarted and the couple sped away. This specific creature is sometimes referred to as the Frametown Monster, though it is widely accepted as related to or the same as the Flatwoods Monster. I'm going to share with you briefly information about the Civilian Saucer Investigation Group. Before I go there, I do want to say I am going to jump around a little bit here. So you've been given the story of what happened September 12th in Flatwoods with the sighting of the Flatwoods Monster. And I've given you the brief little sighting of the reptilian monster the very next day. Now I'm going to be jumping around a little bit. Hopefully everything is cohesive, but just bear with me. It's all connected. So, the Civilian Saucer Investigation Group. In late 1951, several scientists, aeronautical engineers, and interested persons established a UFO study group. Walter Rydell, a North American aviation employee and former German rocket scientist who came to the U.S. under Operation Paperclip, was a prominent member. I mention that because after the Flatwoods event, investigators from the Civilian Saucer Investigation Group gathered quite a few accounts from witnesses who claimed to have experienced similar or related phenomena. One was the story of a mother and her 21-year-old daughter who claimed to have encountered a creature with the same appearance and odor a week prior to the September 12th incident. The encounter affected the daughter so badly that she was confined to a hospital for 3 weeks. They also received a report from the mother of a local farmer, who said that at the approximate time of the crash on September 12th, her house had been violently shaken and her radio cut out for 45 minutes. There was another account from the director of the local Board of Education, who claimed he saw a flying saucer taking off at 6:30 a.m. the morning of September 13th. So to recap here briefly, the Flatwoods creature seen by the May family and friends on the night of September 12, 1952, was reported to be about 10 feet high and 4 feet wide. It appeared to be some sort of robotic suit or spacecraft rather than an organic being. It had a cowl in the shape of an ace of spades, and its head was bright red and round. The two eyes were described as portholes, glowing greenish orange, and about the size of $50. Its body was a metallic armored structure, lined with thick vertical pipes. There are some discrepancies as to the color of the metal, with some people saying dark green and others saying black. Though I imagine at night and in a state of panic or terror, green and black could be pretty similar to each other. I also saw descriptions where it said that it may have been shiny metal that was reflecting the color of the bushes and grass seen around the creature. As far as arms, there are some who say that it was armless, and others that say it had small, toy-like or stick-like arms. The creature seen on September 13th is believed to be the same creature from Flatwoods. It had similar pipe-lined metallic armor from the waist down, but from the waist up, this creature was a reptilian. We're going to put a pin in the monster for a moment and talk about what was going on in 1952. The U.S. was involved in the Korean War. The Cold War was going on, and President Harry Truman was worried about the possible nuclear attack from Russia. Radar was insufficient, and there were defense gaps under 5,000 feet, so 200,000 civilian volunteer sky watchers, called the Grand Observers Corps, worked with the Air Force to monitor the skies over the United States. It seemed like all the eyes in America were focused on the sky, looking for Soviet bombers. And with so many people looking up, it's no surprise that there was a rash of UFO sightings. The high number of UFO reports caused a concern that if Russia actually did launch an aerial attack, the UFO reports would clog communication channels and block other, more serious reports from being received. I'm sure everyone listening is familiar with Project Blue Book, but what you might not be familiar with is the first Air Force UFO project was called Project Sign, and it began in 1947. It was renamed Project Grudge in 1949 and operated until 1951. Then late in 1951, Project Grudge became Project Blue Book and operated for 17 years until it was disbanded in 1969. 1952 saw the highest number of UFO reports in Project Blue Book's 17-year history, and the highest in the 22 total years the Air Force was in charge of UFO reports. Out of 1,501 official reports evaluated, 303 of those were designated as unidentified or unknown. So now we're going to go back to July of 1952. I'm sure you're wondering why exactly we're going back in time, but I promise it's kind of important and relevant to the story of the Flatwoods Monster. Because I don't think the monster is a monster in the sense of a cryptid. I'm pretty sure it's alien. So a news article from July 29, 1952, says within 6 hours, 4 to 12 unidentified objects were reported to have appeared on radar screens at Washington National Airport and nearby Andrews Air Force Base. Jet pilots flying at 600 miles per hour searched the air. One pilot reported spotting the objects twice, but was unable to overtake them. Again, these pilots are traveling at 600 miles per hour, but can't overtake these things. The AP reports that so far as could be determined, jets never before had been sent on such a mission. Civilian pilots reported seeing the lights on 4 different occasions from 7:15 p.m. to 8:48 p.m., all in the immediate vicinity of Washington. One was spotted by National Airlines pilot near Andrews Air Force Base, one by a United Airlines pilot 7 miles from Herndon, Virginia, and 2 by a Civil Aeronautics Administration's inspection aircraft pilot, one at Beltsville, Maryland, and one near Andrews Air Force Base. The objects were described as glowing white lights. It's a pretty big deal when UFOs are buzzing around the skies of the nation's capital. And that's kind of why I included this here. It's a big deal. These things are flying around the skies of Washington, D.C., where the White House is located, the Pentagon, the Capitol building. Our country's government is all, for the most part, housed in this area, and you have up to 12 different unidentified things flying around. So it's the first time they send fighter jets up to see what's going on. And they can't. They can't get close to these things. The number of UFO reports reached its height the summer of 1952 and declined a bit in September of 1952, except for one day in particular. I bet you can guess what day that is. That's right, September 12th. On that day, there were 102 locations over the U.S. where witnesses saw and reported strange aerial objects over 9 East Coast states during a 21-hour span. Several of those were reported as landed or crashed around the country, and on several other reports, an alien was seen outside their craft. Basically, on Friday, September 12th, all hell broke loose in the skies of the United States. Hundreds of Americans reported seeing UFOs up and down the East Coast, as well as sightings in California. Things began at 1:30 a.m. when 2 oil well drillers in Bladensburg, Ohio, saw something while working the midnight shift. The next day, the 2 men told their friend about the sighting. Their friend reported it to Fate magazine. The friend said, they sighted the object about 2,000 feet from where they were working and about 150 feet from the ground. It was lit up very bright in the inside and seemed to have windows only on one side. It circled near the ground for nearly half an hour, making very little noise. Then, all at once, it made a loud noise like steam blowing, and with a bright flash it flew out of sight with the speed of a falling star. At 2:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the quiet in the town of Middletown, Pennsylvania, was interrupted by a noise that echoed through the air. The noise was the sound of heavy artillery being fired into the sky. A lone patrol guard on duty at Olmsted Air Force Base saw a UFO fly across the sky. It was neither plane nor helicopter and had no wings. The guard first noticed the object because he heard a noise that sounded like heavy projectile artillery and saw a blue light in the sky. The object was oval-shaped and solid. The guard made 3 sketches of the object and drew it making unconventional maneuvers. He said the object changed speed and direction and brightness, and when the object disappeared, the noise stopped. At 4 p.m. in Santa Monica, California, which is 7 p.m. Eastern Time, a UFO sighting prompted the Air Force to scramble fighter jets from March Air Force Base. On the East Coast, the Air Defense Identification Zone, which is the airspace in which the control and recognition of aircraft was required, had been violated by an unidentified craft. A UFO, which was ablaze, soared west over the Atlantic Ocean, through the Coastal Air Defense Identification Zone, and headed towards the mid-Atlantic coast. Because this aircraft had not given warning or properly identified itself according to protocol, it was considered a threat to the United States. Under Air Force rules of engagement, the unknown aircraft had shown just cause to be intercepted by jet interceptors. In D.C., military radars tracked the object, which was on a direct course for the Capitol. As the object continued west, President Truman and the Pentagon officials declined to intercept the incoming UFO and waited. Shortly after it approached and passed over D.C., and it continued west. There were so many sightings of flaming objects in the sky. One flew over the Baltimore area, specifically the Baltimore County suburb of Catonsville. Residents there thought the object would surely land, but it continued flying west over Frederick, Hagerstown, and Cumberland, Maryland, then continued into West Virginia, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Morgantown, West Virginia, and Zanesville, Ohio. several other locations received numerous calls about burning planes crashing to the ground. 2 or 3 commercial airline pilots reported objects flashing past their planes during flight. After the object left the Baltimore area heading northwest, it changed direction and made a 45-degree turn heading northeast. According to spotters, the thing actually followed directional radio beacons of nearby airports. There were many who wrote all these sightings off as meteors. The U.S. Naval Observatory said the report sounded like typical meteor displays. Descriptions of the objects varied widely, but all witnesses agreed the blazing objects moved horizontally and zoomed awfully low. I looked up meteor showers in September 1952, and the only one occurred August 28th through September 5th, with the peak on August 31st and the best display time just before dawn. There was no recorded meteor shower listed for December 12th to 13th, 1952. And when's the last time a meteor changed direction? Back in Flatwoods, West Virginia, the next day, witness Kathleen May had to take her children to the doctor because their throats and noses were raw and so swollen that they couldn't drink. Gene Lemon, the National Guardsman who had been with them the night before, convulsed and vomited all night, as had all the May children. National Guard troops were sent into the area. The colonel, with just a few men, went to investigate as a covert operation. There were 30 troops, and their first task was to cordon off the area. Then they were to gather specimen samples. They took samples of dirt and leaves found with an oily substance, and there was a 20-foot area of flattened grass. Also, the U.S. Air Force directed the West Virginia National Guard to mobilize into Braxton County the evening of September 12, 1952, to look for an alleged plane crash site in Frametown. And earlier in the evening, the sheriff was called out to a different location to investigate a different alleged plane crash. So what the heck happened in September 1952? Was it a huge hoax, or was this an actual close encounter? I'd have to go with close encounter. My opinion would have to be that the increase in dabbling with nuclear arms at the time in various different countries might have sparked the interest of creatures elsewhere in the universe. I mean, apparently they do seem to frequent areas with nuclear power plants. No matter what, something strange went down in that hillside field on Mr. Fisher's farm. That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can find Lurk wherever you find your favorite podcast, because let's face it, Lurk is one of your favorite podcasts. You can also find Lurk at lurkpodcast.com. On the website, we have all of our episodes, along with links to our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. If you like what you hear, tell a friend. And until next time, keep lurking.